Hey guys, this is Neil from Edureka and welcome to this Blockchain 101 session. Now without wasting any time, let's move forward and look at today's agenda. Now the first thing that we'll be discussing is what exactly is blockchain, because it's essential that you understand what blockchain is to appreciate blockchain ahead. Moving on from there, we'll talk about the various concepts of blockchain which make it highly popular and one of the most trending technologies in today's market. After that, we'll talk about Hyperledger Fabric, which again is a derivative of blockchain, but is one of the most popularly growing technology as well. So there we'll see how Hyperledger Fabric has revolutionized the industry. Then we'll talk about blockchain use cases, how it's being used in different domains, as well as we'll see what blockchain has revolutionized in different industries and how it is changing the conventional system. Finally, we'll also be working on a demo involving smart contracts where I'll help you understand how to create a smart contract. So I hope you guys are clear. Great, so all of you seem to be clear. So let's not waste any time. Let's move forward to the first topic. That is, what exactly is blockchain? Now, blockchain is the core technology that brought in the most popular cryptocurrency known as Bitcoin system. To put it quite simply, blockchain brought in a platform wherein people could exchange these cryptocurrencies as such. Now, as the name suggests, a blockchain basically is a chain from different blocks. But you might be wondering what exactly is present inside this block. Now, to give you a simple understanding, this block contains the details of all the transactions that happen using Bitcoins. So you combine all these transactions and then store it into a block, which then gets linked correspondingly. At every given fixed interval of time, there is a new block created. The present scenario helps you create a new block somewhere in 15 to 20 minutes. But again, this is something that keeps varying with respect to that. Now, the blockchain system in itself is not present at one single position. It's distributed across a peer-to-peer network, and anyone who wishes to join this network is free to do that. So what you're doing by joining the blockchain network is that you're downloading the complete ledger of transactions that have happened on the blockchain system. Now, don't worry when I say it's complete list of ledgers which have transaction details, because all the data present here is completely encrypted. So your personal data does not get affected here. Now, how that happens, we'll be learning up in the upcoming slides. So let's move forward and talk about the various features of blockchain. So the first cool feature of blockchain is that it uses a distributed public ledger. Now, what do I mean by distributed public ledger is that all the transactions that happen on the blockchain system is stored on a ledger. And this ledger is completely public as well as distributed across the whole network. But hold on, you don't have to worry yet. All the data that is present in this ledger is just transaction details. That is the transaction ID number. But trust me, even if you do take the transaction IDs from here, you cannot hack into anyone's account and steal their balance. So it also ensures that you're completely anonymous. And this is achieved using the hash encryption that is part of the blockchain feature. Now, the hash encryption is a unidirectional encryption method where you feed the input and the output is completely unique. So from this output, you cannot guess what exactly was the input as well. So this in turn makes it completely secure. Apart from that, there is a concept known as proof of work. Now, proof of work basically is used as a means to validate the new blocks that get created. And finally, there are some incentives provided to those who will create the new block as well. So let's deep dive into each one of them and understand them in more detail. Now, as I had mentioned here, we use a distributed ledger. What do I mean by distributed ledger is that everyone who's part of the system gets a copy of the ledger system. And there's no central ledger system existing. It's because it's distributed through across anyone who's part of the blockchain system. Now, you might be wondering, if you have a copy to the ledger, can you not just modify the ledger and make profit out of it? Definitely not. This is where the peer-to-peer network of blockchain system comes into hand. Because what happens is, even if you try to manipulate a ledger, it is only reflected in your ledger. When you try to send across to everyone that these are the transactions that have happened in the ledger, then what happens is, since the majority of the people that are part of this group have the copy of the original ledger, the fake transactions or the invalid transactions get rejected. And this completely ensures that no fake transactions or invalid transactions are part of the blockchain system as well. And since it is spread across everyone who's part of the blockchain system, so even if you lose your copy of the ledger, you can always download it from one of the other people holding on to the ledger. So the blockchain system will help you do that without a problem. Now, I'm sure you might be wondering, even if I get the details of transaction, Would it not be possible to hack their account from all the information present there? The answer is no. Because firstly, the ledger contains details of only the transactions, the amount of transaction being happening, as well as the timestamp when the transaction has initiated. Now, even the transaction ID that is part of the ledger is completely encrypted, and this encrypted value actually is a hashed output value. So let's talk about the hashed value next. Now, to give you a better understanding of how the hash function works, let's take an example here. Let's say I'm going to give hello world as an input to the hash function. It is going to give me a corresponding output. Now, looking at this output, I'm quite sure none of you can guess that hello world was the input. And this algorithm is so complex that even if you make a slight change with respect to the input, the output value completely changes. Let me show you that with this. Now here what I'm doing is, along with my hello world, I'm just putting an exclamation mark. But when you look at the output, it is totally different from our previous output. So here the hash value has completely changed. This in turn ensures that the output value is completely safe and secure, and it's just a unidirectional encryption that keeps happening. So this way what happens is, no one can actually find out the details that is being passed through the hashing algorithm. So a decryption cannot happen in this place. Similarly, what I would do is I'll just change the capital H and capital W to small h and small w. That time what happens is, it again completely changes with respect to the same. So as I had mentioned, it's not easy for you to just look at the output value and decide what the input value is. Now in the blockchain system, we use a SHA-256 encryption methodology, and unlike most other encryption algorithms, a hash function cannot be decrypted. That is, from the output you cannot decrypt the input. Now imagine all your details, personal details, would be hashed. Then wouldn't you feel secure at least to one level? Definitely, even I would feel that. But apart from that, you also used a group of encryption technologies like the public key private key encryption system on these hash values as well. So that adds on another layer of security as well to the blockchain details. So even if someone tries a brute force approach to guess all the values, he may be able to encrypt the data that is being encrypted with the public key or the private key. So he may be able to get the hash value which I have encrypted using my public key or private key, but at the same time he cannot decrypt it any further because this is a unidirectional hash function. Then he has to try out every possible value that is there out there to get the correct answer. So you can see here it occupies more than 53 places. So that's a huge number where you need to guess all the possible inputs to just get the output. So the complexity again increases as a whole. Now you might be still wondering, okay, I've understood how the distributed ledger works. I've understood how the data present in this ledger is secure as well. But then who adds this data to the block, or who creates the new block for the blockchain system? That is the job of a Bitcoin miner. Now, how does he do that? Is basically he solves a mathematical complex puzzles. Now, to give you a better understanding of what exactly is present in a block, there are mainly three major things that are part of a block. The first part is the hash of the previous value. That is the previous block that was present. You're going to take the hash address of that. That has to be included into the present block. This is mainly to ensure that we have a chain of blocks, and that's exactly where the name came in the blockchain system. Apart from that, it also has block data. Now block data has the details with respect to all the transactions that have happened in the interval when the last block was added. So as I had mentioned earlier, the interval between the creation of blocks is somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes. So all the transactions that have been taken place in that time frame and have been verified by the miner can be added to this block. So again, you use a hashing algorithm here as well. So this again ensures that no one can decrypt your data. Finally comes the concept of nodes. This is the part which makes blockchain system interesting. Okay. Now these people known as miners mainly do two major tasks. One is that they verify all the transactions that are part of the transaction pool. Now there are millions of transactions that come in every instant on the blockchain transaction pool. So they pick up a few of them and they start verifying. Now there's always the case where someone is trying to send bitcoins when they don't have the sufficient balance. Now this needs to be identified and rejected, and that's exactly is what a blockchain miner would be doing. He'd reject all these fake transactions and ensure only the valid transactions are part of the blockchain. Apart from doing this, he'll also start building the new block. Now, while he's building the new block, he needs to compute something known as the nonce. Now, The nonce basically is a value that you need to try to achieve by using a hit and trial method. Basically, you need to just guess the value of nonce. Now, hold on, it's not as simple as you think, because given the present scenario, in the year 2016, you had to compute close to 20 quadrillion values of nonce before you got the final solution. Now, once you get the correct value of nonce, now it's always predefined what the value of nonce should be for every block. So once you've successfully guessed it, so you can tell everyone, I have successfully computed the value of nonce and my block is complete. So I'm adding it to the blockchain. Now this value of nonce in itself is a proof of work. This means that you have invested your resource and you are completely correct with respect to the values present in the blockchain. Because automatically when you are creating a block, only valid transactions are added to it. So thereby all the transactions present in this block also are valid as such. So it basically is a challenge that you need to overcome, where you need to compute a specific value. So it's a guess game. Now you might be wondering, why would anyone actually waste their time solving these mathematical puzzles? That is because they get a specific incentive. Now every miner who validates a block, that is who creates a block which goes on to become a part of the blockchain system, gets a reward of 12.5 bitcoins. Now 12.5 bitcoins is not a small amount. Given today's market value of Bitcoin being close to $3,500 a Bitcoin, it would be close to $44,000 that you make from mining a new block. Imagine, $44,000 is a very huge amount. But the problem is that no individual today can create a block by himself or herself as such, because the resource needed to compute these values, as I had mentioned, you need to try out at least 20 quadrillion values. Now imagine guessing 20 quadrillion values, and that too in a time frame of just 10 or 15 minutes. Now this is why what happens today is that miners come together and form something known as a pool. Now pool basically is same as the groups that we form. Here what happens is that they share the responsibility of finding the values, and then what happens is, based on the resource that each one has contributed, the reward gets distributed accordingly. Sounds interesting, right? Great. Now one thing you need to understand is that the generation of bitcoins happens only in this way. That is, only by creating new blocks can you have newer bitcoins come into the system. Okay, because there is no other way where you can create bitcoins. The bitcoins are only provided as rewards for mining, and there can be only 21 million bitcoins in the world. This is mainly because the maximum range that bitcoin values can take, and it is believed that given the present scenario, the last bitcoin is going to be mined by 2140. So if you are looking to move into this market, now would be a really good time, seeing as to how the bitcoin market is growing as well. So I hope you guys have got quite an insight into the blockchain system and the Bitcoin system as well. So any doubts still here? Great. Moving forward, let's talk about the Hyperledger Fabric. The Hyperledger project is managed by the Linux Foundation and is something like a cross-platform collaboration approach. Here you have organizations working in different domains coming together and working on the same ground. Now the Hyperledger is one of the most trending technologies today. So if you are looking to move into the Bitcoin and the blockchain domain, then Hyperledger is something that I would definitely recommend that you look into. Now, the reason why it is being so popular is because the Hyperledger project helps provide people with private as well as public blockchains for their needs and requirements. Basically, you don't need to worry about setting up the blockchain. Hyperledger would help you do that as well, thereby reducing the effort that you need to put in, as well as the complexity of bringing people on board and giving them the resource needed to set up the blockchain. Once you've given them your requirements, they'll help you in creating a private blockchain as part of the main blockchain itself. Now, the advantage of this is, in future, let's say there are two companies who have their data present on the Hyperledger and they want to communicate this data. Then it becomes quite easy. Rather than connecting them to your servers or putting all your data on cloud, you just need to connect these two blockchains, thereby completely sharing the data that you want. At the same time, you can set the permissions, thereby ensuring you let them see only what you want to. Now moving on from here, let's talk about a use case of how blockchain can be implemented in the stock market. Now the stock trading system has been dated back to 1602, where the first public stock was of East India Company. Okay, Although it has been around for 400 years, the conventional system is something that has still not changed. It is still almost the same as it was back then. There have been few minor changes, however there was no major change to the system as well. Now talking about the issues with the current system, there are depositories as well as agents. Now these people of contact, these points of contacts themselves are failing because we always hear certain frauds happening between agents. There are instances where you cannot completely trust them or even certain organizations as well. Apart from that, the registration, transferring of stocks as well as distributions, everything involve a certain fees associated with it. So every transaction that you would be performing in itself has a separate transaction fees attached to it. Finally, there's also the administrative fees that comes within, which is always growing. Now, if you worked with stocks, then I'm quite sure that you are familiar with all these challenges as well. Now, the major issue with respect to the current system, let's take the first issue itself. Now, there are mainly two problems here. The first is the regulator, that is the person who manages all this, and then you have the clearing house. Now, every stock exchange, let's say NIFT or Sensex, has its own clearing house. And at times what happens is clearing house in itself becomes the single point of contact where the failure for the whole system takes place. So some corruption here can in itself make the whole system crumble. And there have been issues over the centuries when this single point of contact themselves has been the source for all the frauds that we see. Now let's talk about our problem statement. What we need to do is design a blockchain solution to solve the issue of centralized stock exchange system. That is, one central authority governing and managing this should be broken down to decentralized problems. Now the problems with respect to a centralized stock exchange can be that one single organization is taking the money of all others and dumping it for its own profit. There have been a lot of cases like that. Apart from that, the extensive use of market depth is one major concern that happens. Increasing price to earn ratio is also another major concern because all this is completely governed by the central stock exchange. So what we're going to do is that we're going to introduce a blockchain that stores all the transactions made by these regulators, and this ledger would completely be visible to everyone. At any stage, anyone who's part of the public can also view this ledger by just being part of the blockchain system. And anyone who wants to get a verification with respect to how they are doing, they can get an understanding from seeing these blockchain systems as well. Now, this brings in a lot of transparency with respect to how the system works because the blockchain becomes completely visible to the public. So we get a clear-cut idea of what exactly is happening. Because here what happens in today's market is that it's all controlled by one central authority and we have to put our complete trust on them that they would not betray us. But again, times have told us where there have been certain issues. Now this in turn will bring in a lot of transparency as well as increase the trust of the system. And more the trust of the system increases, more will people invest into the system, thereby increasing the value of the system. Now, let's say someone wants to transfer certain amount of stocks from their account to someone else, or they want to sell it. Then what happens is it gets broadcasted across the network, wherein the network of nodes, these could be regulators who validate these transactions. Finally, once they have identified this transaction to be valid, what they'll do is they'll add it to a block and increase the blockchain's length. Now, this block could have just one transaction or even multiple transactions depending on its capacity. So I hope you guys are clear here. Okay, great. Moving on from here, let's try to understand where exactly is blockchain being used apart from the banking domain. Now, as I had mentioned, banking is one of the major domains where blockchains can be implemented and is being implemented as well. Similarly, you have payment and transfer industry where you're transferring certain amount to your friend, family, or even some stranger where you want to make a payment. Definitely the blockchain system can be used. Healthcare is another major domain where you can create a centralized blockchain system where it holds the complete details of the patients, thereby reducing the amount of paperwork and completely keeping the secure data of the patients as well. Law enforcement would also be a useful domain. So here what you can do is that you can completely share the data of all the criminals. It could also bring some awareness to the public, giving them knowledge of the common thieves in their area. Also make it quite easy for interagencies to share their data. Then you have voting domain. Now voting domain, I will talk about it extensively in the upcoming slides. Transportation is another domain. Online music, you can ensure that the piracy of online music is completely reduced. Real estate market is something else that is going to get revolutionized with blockchain. Now, all these domains are just the beginning. There are multiple domains where blockchain can be used. And trust me guys, every given day there is newer technologies being used. So this is the right time for you to move into the blockchain market if you're looking to get a good career here. Now, in the banking domain, what happens is by implementing blockchain, you can basically cut across $20 billion worth middleman cost. Now this $20 billion includes the middleman transaction fees that you provide to various banks and financial organizations. Now wouldn't you like to get rid of all the transaction fees that you have to pay every now and then? Definitely I would like to. Apart from that, hacking into the details of the customers becomes completely impossible. Because as I had mentioned, the blockchain ledger stores only the transaction details, not the account details. Thereby, even if you hack into the ledger, get some details of the transactions, you cannot get the idea of who has made how much transaction and how much balance do they hold in their account. Now, since it is running on a blockchain system, the issue of double spending as well as financial crisis gets reduced to a complete minimum. This is mainly because we follow a decentralized approach, and here every transaction is validated and verified before getting approved. So the next domain is payment and transfer domain. Here basically what happens is you have complete security with respect to your details. Now let's take an example of Paytm, which is one of the most popular payment application today in the market in India at least. Here what happens is you need to either share your mobile number with the user or you need to show them their QR code. But when you do that, what happens is that firstly you're sharing your personal number with someone else. Secondly, what happens is that they get the details of who has to receive the money, and this in turn causes certain amount of confusion as well as is some amount of breach of security as well. But by using Bitcoin wallets, what you can do is you just need to provide them with a QR code or your private key. Thereby what happens is no one completely gets any idea of who exactly is receiving the money. At the same time, you're completely sure no one has your personal details. Now there is an upside and a downside to this. You've heard of the upside. Now let me just give you an idea of the downside to it. If most of you have been aware of the news, there was recently a ransomware attack that had taken. There what happened was the perpetrators had requested payment in mode of bitcoins and they had given their Bitcoin wallet address. Now since Bitcoin system maintains a complete anonymity with respect to the user details, no one really knew who exactly did that money go to, and it became hard for the law enforcement agencies to track them. Now, one of the major reasons that Bitcoin and blockchain system can be used for payment and transfer domain is because there's no fixed transaction fees attached to it. There are certain blockchains and cryptocurrency systems that add an additional transaction fees, but you always have the option of either paying a minimal transaction fees or no transaction fees at all. It's completely left up to the user. Here you don't need to basically set up your bank accounts. We all know the hassle of setting up a bank account. Here all you need to do is download a Bitcoin wallet and then you're ready to go as such. As I had mentioned earlier as well, the anonymity factor comes into this picture. You've seen both the good and the bad side. Good is that no one can really know who you are, but there's also a bad side when you use it for the wrong purpose. Coming to the voting domain, now this is one interesting thing that I would like to bring to your attention. If implemented correctly, we can use the blockchain system to create an online voting system wherein everyone who has a valid voter's ID can vote, and there could be no issue of vote frauds or lost records or even foul plays that happen. Because we know the blockchain system is completely secure and cannot be manipulated. Apart from that, the hashing algorithm can ensure that no double voting happens as well. Because everyone is going to get a unique identification number for their vote, and this in turn cannot be duplicated as such. This in turn will definitely lead to an increase of turnout. Imagine having the ability of voting for your favorite candidate just from an application in your phone. Wouldn't that be handy? Great. Moving on from here, let's look at some of the blockchain applications that are completely revolutionizing the industry as such. First is Follow My Vote. Follow My Vote is being the first online blockchain solution for various people to identify themselves and cast their online vote. Now it is a work in progress, but definitely we can expect a result soon. Now Showcard is another revolutionary product that is built on the blockchain system. Here you can completely store all your valid identification cards and then provide link to this for any verification or validation as such, thereby completely ensuring that no one can manipulate it as well as giving you complete access to who views it as well. Then you have Arcade City. Now Arcade City is one of the most upcoming technologies in the blockchain system in the field of transportation. Now this also believed to be an Uber killer because it helps users to maintain their anonymity as well as perform carpooling as such. Then you have Everledger, which provides you an immutable blockchain ledger, and this is mainly used for diamond transactions and validation. So today when you go into most popular diamond merchants, I'm quite sure you can find them using Everledger to maintain a ledger of all the diamonds transactions involved. Then you have your Brooklyn microgrid, which basically is a platform for buying and selling energy that they produce from their rooftop solar panels. Interesting, right? Finally, you have BitShares, which basically is a high performance decentralized trading platforms on Bitcoin. Now the item of trade can be anything as per your choice, but again it is quite growing as such. Now these are just some of the revolutionary ideas that have just started in the blockchain system. So if you do have some idea, I would definitely recommend that you start away, because this is one of the greatest time for people who are moving into the blockchain and Bitcoin technology. Great. So moving forward, let's look at today's demo for the session. Now in today's session, what we'll basically be doing is that we'll be creating a smart contract on the Ethereum Remix browser. Now before we go on to talk about what exactly is a smart contract, let me talk a bit about Solidity programming language. Now if you are looking to work on Ethereum as well as create various smart contracts, then Solidity is one of the most important languages that you need to be aware of. Now Solidity is an object-oriented language like JavaScript, but it also supports inheritance libraries as well as various user-defined types as such. Okay, now these are just some of the basic features of Solidity. If you want to know and learn more about Solidity, I would recommend that you look at their official website, that is solidity.readthedocs.io. So let me just show you the page. Now this is the official homepage of Solidity, and if you are looking to explore this language more, this is the best place that I would suggest that you get started with. Okay, coming back to our slides. Okay, now using Solidity you can create contracts for various different purposes. Now as I had mentioned earlier, you can create a contract that would help you for voting. Let's say even if you want to create a complex contract, let's say there's a condition that you want that multiple people have to sign before the contract becomes true. And in a real world scenario that is true. So all such thing can be done with Solidity. Okay, now coming on to today's demo session, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a smart contract. Now smart contract word may seem a bit complex to you, so let me put it quite simply. A smart contract basically is a program which helps you either transfer your digital currencies or an asset as such between two parties, wherein you are specifying the conditions as such. Now let's look at the example here, what happens. So let's say there are two parties who have come to an understanding where they're trading certain asset with respect to that same. Once they have understood this, they'll go on to form a smart contract which will then be added to the blockchain. Now once this contract has been added to the blockchain, anyone can view this contract and verify it as well. Now this becomes highly essential while you're trading your real estate through digital transactions. Now let's say tomorrow you want to see who has owned the property before the present owner. So that can be really helpful if the contract was present on the blockchain, and it becomes completely easy for anyone to verify it, as well as at the same time it avoids the need for paper transactions. Now let me show you how the smart contract works. So this is what your Ethereum block browser would look like. Okay, so here you have details of the block, the transaction size and timestamp. Okay, now all the code that you're going to write in Solidity is going to be written in this Remix Solidity IDE. Okay, so all you have to do is just search for Remix Ethereum. Okay, so this will give you a search result. The first one that you see, Remix Solidity IDE, this is what you want. Okay, so here you have the sample code. Okay, here you have the contract details, the environment from the input, the accounts present in the environment, the gas limit as well as the value. Okay, so first let me change the value of injected Web3. It has to be Web3 provider. I'm getting this notification. Let me click on OK. Here it says it's going to communicate with my port 8545. Now at my 8545 port, there's also the application known as test RPC running, which has the complete list of all the accounts as well as their private key present. So 8545 is going to be the port at which these two applications are going to communicate. So here let me just click on OK. Now I'm getting a security warning. Let me load this. It may take some time, so I request you to be a bit patient. Now once you've selected on which account you want to create the smart contract, then all you need to do is just click on create option present here. Okay. Now again, as I had mentioned, this may take some time, so I request you to be a bit patient. Great. So now here you can see the cost of this transaction, how much has it cost me to complete this contract transaction. And if you see in the account that has been reduced, earlier it was 1 ether, now it has reduced correspondingly. Another way to validate this is to see it in your test RPC command. Now test RPC is a continuous running program, so it may not be that easy to get the details. Now if you see here, there is the transaction ID for the smart contract that we have just inserted, the contract ID that has been present for the injection, as well as the amount of gas or resource that has been consumed for creation of this contract, which block is this contract present in, as well as the timestamp as to when this was injected. That is with respect to the block. Now what you need to understand is with respect to this program. This is a basic simple program that is used for calculating votes based on delegates. So when you're inserting a transaction, basically means that you're inserting a vote with respect to that same. Okay, now let's go back to our Ethereum browser and let me show you how the transaction looks like. Here you have a new block which has one transaction and a corresponding timestamp. So if you click on the block number, here you can see the block number, the received time, okay, the difficulty and the nonce have been set to 0, and correspondingly the gas limit and the miner details. So here you can see the detail of the transaction, the hash for this transaction, okay, from whom has this transaction come to and to whom it is going. So 0x0 is just being set so that it is going into the system. So with this, I hope you've understood how we can actually push a simple contract into an account and how that transaction would be reflected in our Ethereum block explorer. So again, you have the hash for the transaction present here, you have the from address, you have the to address here, as well as the gas or the resource that cost for this transaction to complete. Thank you for today's session.